Creek. Nobody here but us pigeons.
On a quiet Christmas Eve, a mother's love turns into a fight for survival against a shadow from the past. Sarah Miller, 32 years old and 8 months pregnant, sat alone in her small, cozy house on the edge of Willow Creek, a quiet town nestled in the snowy hills of upstate New York. It was Christmas Eve 2025, and the world outside her window was blanketed in soft, fresh snow. The air smelled of pine and frost, and the streetlights cast a gentle glow on the empty road. Her husband, Tom, a truck driver, was on his last run before the holiday. He'd promised to be home by dawn to celebrate with her and open the small pile of presents under their modest Christmas tree. For now, it was just Sarah and the baby she carried, a girl they'd already named Emma. Sarah rubbed her swollen belly, feeling the familiar kicks that made her smile despite her aching back. She'd spent the day decorating, stringing lights on the tree, and wrapping a tiny onesie for Emma as a symbolic gift. The house was warm, filled with the scent of cinnamon from a candle on the coffee table. She'd made herself a cup of chamomile tea and settled on the couch, a knitted blanket over her lap. The TV played an old black and white Christmas movie, the volume low, filling the room with soft dialogue and music. Everything felt peaceful, almost perfect. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Sarah glanced at the clock, 8:45 p.m. She sipped her tea, her eyes heavy from the long day. Being pregnant made everything tiring, but she was used to it by now. She adjusted her position, wincing as a sharp pain shot through her lower back. "Easy, Emma," she whispered, patting her belly. The baby kicked again, as if answering. Then a sound broke the quiet, a soft thud from the front porch. Sarah's head turned toward the door. It wasn't loud, more like a footstep or something brushing against the wood. She waited, listening. The wind howled again, and she told herself it was just a branch or snow falling from the roof. Still, she set her tea down and stood, moving slowly to the door. Her slippers shuffled on the hardwood floor. She peered through the peephole, her breath catching. The porch was empty, the snow untouched except for faint drifts blown by the wind. No footprints, no one. She locked the door anyway, turning the deadbolt with a satisfying click. "Just the storm," she muttered, but her heart beat a little faster. She returned to the couch, picking up her phone to text Tom. The screen showed 10% battery. She frowned and plugged it into the charger by the lamp. The movie flickered on the TV, and she tried to focus on it, but her ears stayed alert. Another sound came, this time from the kitchen. A faint creak, like wood settling, or a window being nudged open. Sarah froze. Her house was old, built in the 1950s, and it made noises sometimes. But this felt different. She called out, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Silence. The wind whistled outside, but nothing else answered. She stood again, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Moving carefully, she walked to the kitchen, flipping on the light. The room was tidy, dishes in the sink, a loaf of bread on the counter. But the window above the sink was cracked open just an inch. Snow dusted the sill, melting into tiny puddles. Sarah's stomach twisted. She was sure she'd locked all the windows that morning. She crossed the room and pushed the window shut, locking it tight. The cold air stung her fingers. "Stupid old house," she said, trying to laugh it off. But her eyes scanned the backyard through the glass. The snow-covered lawn was lit faintly by the neighbors' Christmas lights. But beyond that, the darkness was thick. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, watching. Back in the living room, she sat down, pulling the blanket tighter. The power flickered, the TV screen going black for a second before buzzing back to life. Sarah's breath hitched. She told herself it was just the storm, just the old wiring. But her hands trembled as she reached for her phone again. It was at 12% now, charging slowly. She typed a quick text to Tom. "Heard a weird noise." "Probably nothing. Call me when you can." She hit send and waited. No reply came. The movie played on, but Sarah wasn't watching anymore. Her eyes darted to the windows, the door, the hallway leading to the back of the house. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. She didn't know it yet, but outside, hidden in the shadows of the snowy night, a figure stood motionless, their eyes fixed on her glowing windows. They had been waiting for hours, and they weren't leaving. Sarah sat on the couch, her eyes flicking between the TV and the dark windows. The Christmas movie's cheerful music felt wrong now, like it was mocking the unease creeping up her spine. The clock on the wall ticked past 9:15 p.m. Her phone, still plugged in, showed no reply from Tom. She checked the battery, 15% now. She tapped out another text. Please call soon. Feeling weird, she hit send, but the message stayed stuck on sending. The signal was weak, probably because of the storm. Outside, the snow fell heavier, piling up against the windows. Sarah tried to focus on the movie, but every sound made her jump. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the house settling, the wind rattling the gutters. She pulled the blanket tighter, her hand resting on her belly. Emma kicked hard, and Sarah whispered, "It's okay, baby. Just a stormy night." But then another noise. A soft scrape, like metal on wood, coming from the back hallway. Sarah's breath caught. The hallway led to the bedroom and the back door. She hadn't checked the back door since morning. Her heart pounded as she stood, her legs shaky from the weight of her pregnancy. She grabbed a flashlight from the coffee table just in case the power went out again. "Probably nothing," she said aloud, but her voice trembled. She moved toward the hallway, the flashlight's beam cutting through the dim light. The living room felt too open now, too exposed with its big windows. She wished she'd hung thicker curtains. The hallway was narrow, with faded wallpaper and a single bulb overhead. She flipped the light switch, but it flickered and went out. She cursed under her breath and turned on the flashlight. The beam swept over the closed bedroom door and the back door at the end of the hall. The back door had a small window covered by a thin curtain. Sarah's stomach churned as she stepped closer. She reached for the doorknob, her hand shaking. The lock was still in place, but the curtain was slightly askew, like someone had brushed against it. She pulled it aside and shone the flashlight outside. The backyard was a sea of white, the snow untouched except for a faint trail near the fence. It was hard to tell in the dark, but it looked like footprints, half covered by fresh snow. Sarah's chest tightened. She backed away, locking the door again, though it felt pointless now. Someone had been out there. Maybe they still were. She hurried back to the living room, her slippers slapping against the floor. Her phone was at 18% now, but still no signal. She grabbed it and typed a 911 text, just in case, but it wouldn't send. "Come on," she muttered, holding the phone higher as if that would help. The TV flickered again, the movie cutting to static for a second before returning. Sarah's eyes darted to the windows. The snow made it hard to see anything outside, but she felt watched. Then a new sound, a faint tap, tap, tap from upstairs. Sarah froze. Her house was a single story, but there was a small attic with a pull-down ladder in the hallway. She hadn't been up there in months. It was just storage for old boxes and holiday decorations. The tapping stopped, then started again, slow and deliberate. Tap, 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 like someone testing the floor. Sarah's mouth went dry. She gripped the flashlight, her other hand on her belly. "It's just the house," she whispered, but she didn't believe it. She moved back to the hallway, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. The attic hatch was there, a small square panel with a pull string. She didn't want to look, but she had to know. She reached up, her fingers brushing the string. Her heart thundered in her chest. Before she could pull, the power went out completely. The TV died, the lights went dark, and the house fell silent except for the wind. Sarah's flashlight was the only light now, its beam shaking in her hand. She backed away from the attic hatch, her breath coming in short gasps. She needed to get out, to go to a neighbor's house, but the storm was bad, and she couldn't move fast with her pregnancy. Then from the attic, a louder sound, a heavy thud, like something falling. Sarah stifled a scream. She stumbled back to the living room, her flashlight sweeping the walls. She grabbed her phone and tried 911 again. Still no signal. She shoved the phone in her pocket and looked around for something to defend herself with. The fireplace poker leaned against the hearth. She grabbed it, the cold metal heavy in her hand. As she stood there clutching the poker, she heard another sound, closer now. A soft creak from the hallway, like a footstep on the old floorboards. She swung the flashlight toward the sound, her heart racing. The beam caught something, a shadow moving just beyond the hallway's entrance. It was quick, gone in a second, but it was real. Someone was in her house. Sarah backed toward the front door, her eyes locked on the hallway. She didn't know who it was or why they were here, but she knew one thing. She had to protect Emma. Her hand tightened on the poker. Outside, the figure in the snow watched, their breath fogging in the cold. They'd waited long enough. Now they were ready to step inside. Sarah stood frozen by the front door, the fireplace poker gripped tightly in her hand. The flashlight shook in her other hand, its beam darting across the living room. The shadow she'd seen in the hallway was gone, but the silence felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. The power was still out, and the only sounds were the wind howling outside and her own ragged breathing. Her phone, useless with no signal, was stuffed in her pocket. She wanted to run, to get to the neighbor's house 100 yards down the road, but the snowstorm raged outside, and her pregnant body felt slow and clumsy. She glanced at the front door. It was locked, the deadbolt still in place, but it didn't feel safe anymore. The creak from the hallway replayed in her mind. Someone was inside. She could feel it. Her hand rested on her belly, where Emma shifted, as if sensing her mother's fear. "We're okay," Sarah whispered, more to herself than the baby. But her voice cracked. Another sound came, a soft shuffle like shoes on the kitchen floor. Sarah's heart lurched. She swung the flashlight toward the kitchen doorway, but the beam caught only the edge of the counter and the glint of a knife left out from dinner prep. She cursed herself for not grabbing it earlier. The poker felt heavy, but she wasn't sure she could swing it hard enough to do any damage. She took a step toward the kitchen, then stopped. What was she doing? She couldn't fight someone, not like this. She needed to hide or get out. The neighbors, the Millers, were her best bet. Their porch light was visible through the storm, a faint glow in the distance. If she could make it there, she'd be safe. But that meant crossing the snowy yard, and she wasn't sure she could move fast enough. Before she could decide, a new sound stopped her cold, a low, deliberate knock from the back door. Knock, 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 slow and steady, like someone was toying with her. Sarah's breath hitched. She backed away from the front door, her eyes darting between the hallway and the kitchen. The knock came again, louder this time. She clutched the poker tighter, her knuckles white. "Who's there?" she called, her voice shaking. No answer. Just the wind and the faint creak of the house. She moved toward the living room window, peering out into the snow. The backyard was a blur of white, but she thought she saw movement near the fence, a dark shape, too tall to be an animal. Her stomach dropped. She turned back to the room, her flashlight sweeping the walls. The beam caught something on the coffee table, a small, folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. Sarah's blood ran cold. She was sure it wasn't there when she'd gotten up to check the hallway. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, the poker still in her other hand. She unfolded it with one hand, her eyes scanning the scrawled words. "You can't hide, Sarah." Her breath stopped. They knew her name. This wasn't random. She dropped the note, her mind racing. Who could it be? An old coworker? A neighbor? Someone from her past? She and Tom had moved to Willow Creek 2 years ago to start fresh after a rough patch in the city. She'd left behind a few bad memories, an ex who'd been too clingy, a boss who'd made her life hell, but nothing like this. Nothing that would bring someone to her house on Christmas Eve. A loud crash came from the kitchen, like glass shattering. Sarah yelped, dropping the flashlight. It hit the floor and flickered but stayed on. She scrambled to pick it up, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She gripped the poker and moved toward the kitchen, her back pressed against the wall. She didn't want to go, but she had to know what was happening. She had to protect Emma. The kitchen was dark, the air cold from the storm. Shards of glass glittered on the floor near the sink. The window she'd locked earlier was wide open now, snow blowing in. Sarah's knees buckled. Someone had broken it. She swung the flashlight around, expecting to see someone, but the room was empty. The knife on the counter was gone. Footsteps sounded behind her, quick, heavy steps from the hallway. Sarah spun around, raising the poker. A figure stood in the doorway, tall and thin, dressed in dark clothes. Their face was hidden by a hood, but their eyes glinted in the flashlight's beam. They held the kitchen knife, its blade catching the light. "Sarah," the figure said, their voice low and raspy, almost familiar. "You didn't think you could run forever, did you?" Sarah screamed, swinging the poker as hard as she could. It hit the figure's arm, and they grunted, stumbling back. The knife clattered to the floor. Sarah didn't wait. She ran for the front door, her pregnant belly slowing her down. She fumbled with the deadbolt, her hands shaking. The figure was already moving, their footsteps loud behind her. She got the door open and stumbled onto the porch, the cold air hitting her like a slap. Snow swirled around her, stinging her face. She took one step, then another, but her foot slipped on the icy steps. She fell hard, pain shooting through her side. She clutched her belly, praying Emma was okay. The figure was at the door now, their shadow looming over her. Sarah scrambled to her feet, gripping the poker. She swung it again, aiming for their head, but they dodged, grabbing her wrist. The poker fell into the snow. Sarah screamed again, kicking and clawing, but the figure was stronger. They dragged her back inside, slamming the door shut. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was the glint of the knife, raised high. Sarah's head throbbed as she came to, her body aching against the cold hardwood floor. Her eyes fluttered open, but the world was blurry. The living room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of snow reflecting through the windows. The power was still out, and the air was heavy with the chill seeping in from the broken kitchen window. She tried to move, but her wrists were bound behind her back with something rough. Duct tape, maybe. Her ankles were tied too, making it impossible to stand. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to breathe. Emma. She had to stay alive for Emma. Her belly felt tight, a dull ache spreading from her fall on the porch. She prayed the baby was okay. She couldn't feel any kicks, but that didn't mean anything, right? Sarah swallowed hard, her mouth dry. The fireplace poker was gone, lost in the snow outside. Her phone was nowhere in sight. The Christmas tree's lights were off, its ornaments glinting faintly in the dimness. The house felt like a tomb. Footsteps echoed from the kitchen, slow, deliberate steps. Sarah's heart raced. She twisted her wrists, trying to loosen the tape, but it held tight, cutting into her skin. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. The intruder was still here, somewhere in the house. She remembered their voice, raspy and familiar, saying her name. "You didn't think you could run forever." The words echoed in her mind, chilling her more than the cold floor. She scanned the room, her eyes adjusting to the dark. The front door was closed, the deadbolt locked. The note she'd found on the coffee table was still there, crumpled on the floor. She needed to figure out who this person was and why they were doing this. Her mind raced through possibilities. Tom had no enemies as far as she knew. He was a quiet man, always working, always kind. But Sarah's past wasn't as clean. Before Willow Creek, she'd lived in Syracuse working as a nurse. There had been a patient, a man who'd gotten too attached, sending her letters after he was discharged. She'd reported him, and he'd disappeared from her life. Could it be him? Or someone else entirely? The footsteps stopped. Sarah held her breath, listening. A shadow moved in the kitchen doorway, tall and thin, the same figure she'd seen before. They stepped into the living room, their boots leaving wet prints on the floor. The hood still hid their face, but they carried something in their hand. Not the knife, but a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. They pointed it at Sarah, and she squinted, turning her face away. "You're awake," the voice said, low and rough. It was a man's voice, but something about it felt off, like he was disguising it. "Good. I didn't want you to miss this." Sarah's throat tightened. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "What do you want?" The figure crouched down, the flashlight beam steady on her face. She couldn't see his eyes, but she felt them, cold and unyielding. "You don't remember me, do you?" he said. "That's okay. You will." He stood and walked to the Christmas tree, running a gloved hand over the ornaments. One fell to the floor, shattering with a soft pop. Sarah flinched. "Please," she said. "I'm pregnant." "Whatever this is, you don't have to do it," the man laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Pregnant," he said almost to himself. "That's why I waited." "Makes it better." He turned back to her, the flashlight beam dropping to her belly. "You took everything from me, Sarah. Now I'm taking it back." Sarah's mind spun. Took everything? She didn't understand. She'd never hurt anyone, not on purpose. As a nurse, she'd saved lives, not ruined them. But the way he said her name, the way he moved, it was like he knew her, like this was personal. She needed to keep him talking, to buy time. Maybe Tom would get her texts. Maybe the neighbors would notice something was wrong. "What did I do?" she asked, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Tell me. Maybe I can fix it." The man tilted his head like he was studying her. "Fix it?" he said. "You can't fix dead, Sarah." He stepped closer, and she saw the knife now, tucked into his belt. Her stomach lurched. She twisted her wrists again, feeling the tape give just a little. If she could keep him distracted, maybe she could get free. "I don't know what you're talking about." she said. "Please, just tell me who you are." He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked to the hallway, his flashlight beam disappearing around the corner. Sarah's heart pounded. She didn't know what he was doing, but she had to act fast. She rolled onto her side, wincing as pain shot through her belly. Using her bound hands, she pushed herself toward the coffee table. There was a pair of scissors in the drawer, left over from wrapping presents. If she could reach them, she could cut the tape. Her fingers fumbled with the drawer, the tape making it hard to grip. She glanced at the hallway, expecting the man to come back any second. The drawer opened with a soft creak, and she saw the scissors, their blades glinting in the dim light. She grabbed them, awkwardly maneuvering them behind her back. The blade nicked her wrist, and she hissed in pain, but she kept working, sawing at the tape. The footsteps returned, faster this time. Sarah froze, the scissors still in her hands. The man stepped into the room, holding something new, a small black bag, like a doctor's kit. He set it on the floor and opened it, pulling out a syringe filled with clear liquid. Sarah's blood ran cold. She didn't know what was in it, but she knew it wasn't good. "You're going to stay quiet," he said, his voice calm now, almost professional. "This is for the baby." Sarah's heart stopped. She didn't think. She twisted her body, slashing the scissors at the tape on her wrists. It tore, just enough for her to pull one hand free. The man lunged, but she was faster, scrambling to her feet. She swung the scissors at him, aiming for his arm. The blade grazed his sleeve, and he cursed, dropping the syringe. Sarah didn't wait. She ran for the hallway, her bare feet slipping on the floor. Her belly slowed her down, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She reached the back door, fumbling with the lock. The man was behind her, his boots pounding. She got the door open and stumbled into the snow, the cold biting her skin. The storm was worse now, the wind blinding her. She didn't know where to go, but she kept moving, clutching the scissors like a lifeline. Behind her, the man stood in the doorway, his flashlight beam cutting through the snow. "You can't run, Sarah," he called. "Not from me." Sarah stumbled through the snow, her bare feet burning with cold. The storm roared around her, wind whipping her hair into her face and snow blinding her vision. She clutched the scissors in her hand, her only weapon, as she pushed forward. Her pregnant belly felt like a weight dragging her down, each step a struggle. Pain pulsed through her side from her fall on the porch, and her wrists stung where the duct tape had cut into her skin. But she couldn't stop. The man was behind her, his flashlight beam slicing through the blizzard like a predator's eye. The neighbor's house, the miller's, was her only hope. Their porch light glowed faintly in the distance, a beacon through the storm. It was maybe 100 yards away, but in the snow and with her condition it felt like miles. Sarah's breath came in sharp gasps, fogging in the freezing air. She glanced back, her heart pounding. The man stood in her doorway, his dark figure outlined against the house. He wasn't running yet, just watching, like he knew she couldn't get far. "Keep going," Sarah whispered to herself, her voice lost in the wind. She thought of Emma, her unborn daughter, and it gave her strength. She had to make it for her baby. The snow was up to her shins now, soaking her pajama pants. Her feet were numb, and every step sent a jolt of pain through her body. She gripped the scissors tighter, her fingers aching from the cold. Halfway across the yard, she tripped over something buried in the snow, a garden hose or a tree root. She fell to her knees, catching herself with one hand. The scissors slipped from her grip and sank into the snow. "No, no, no," she muttered, digging frantically with her freezing hands. Her fingers brushed the metal handle and she pulled them out, relief flooding her. But when she looked back, the man was moving, his flashlight bobbing as he stepped into the storm. Sarah forced herself up, her legs shaking. The miller's house was closer now, the porch light brighter. She could make it. She had to. She staggered forward, the snow slowing her down. Her belly tightened again, a sharp cramp that made her gasp. She stopped for a second, clutching her stomach, terrified it was a contraction. "Not now, Emma," she whispered. "Please, not now." The cramp passed and she kept moving. The wind howled, drowning out any sounds of pursuit, but she knew he was coming. She reached the edge of her property, where a low wooden fence separated her yard from the miller's. She climbed over it awkwardly, her belly making it hard to lift her legs. The snow was deeper here, almost to her knees. She pushed through, her eyes fixed on the light. When she reached the miller's porch, she banged on the door with her fist, the scissors still in her other hand. "Help, please, someone!" she shouted, her voice raw. The house was dark except for the porch light. No one answered. She pounded again, harder, her hand aching. Mr. Miller? Linda, please! The door didn't open. Sarah's heart sank. She remembered the Millers had mentioned going to their daughter's house for Christmas Eve. They might not be home. She tried the doorknob, but it was locked. Tears stung her eyes, mixing with the snow on her face. She turned back, scanning the yard. The man's flashlight was closer now, maybe 50 yards away, moving steadily toward her. Sarah ducked around the side of the house, her back pressed against the cold siding. She needed a plan. She couldn't outrun him, not like this. Her eyes darted around, looking for something, anything to help. There was a shed in the Miller's backyard, its door barely visible through the storm. It might be locked, but it was her only chance to hide. She shuffled through the snow, her feet dragging. The shed was small, used for tools and lawn equipment. She reached the door and pulled, her heart leaping when it opened with a creak. She slipped inside, closing it behind her. The shed was pitch black, smelling of oil and damp wood. She crouched behind a stack of boxes, her breath hitching. The scissors shook in her hand as she listened for footsteps. Outside, the storm muffled everything, but she heard a faint crunch in the snow. He was close. Sarah's mind raced. Who was this man? His words kept replaying. You took everything from me. She tried to think back to her time in Syracuse. The patient who'd sent her letters, his name was Daniel. He'd been quiet, intense, always watching her during his hospital stays. She'd reported him for harassment after he showed up at her apartment one night. The police had warned him to stay away, and she'd never seen him again. Was it him? Could he have found her after all this time? A shadow passed by the shed's small window, and Sarah clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. The flashlight beam swept over the glass, then moved away. She heard the crunch of snow again, fainter now. Was he leaving? She didn't dare move. Her body ached, her belly cramping again. She rubbed it gently, whispering, "We're okay, Emma, we're okay." Then a loud bang on the shed door. Sarah's heart stopped. The door rattled, like he was testing it. She gripped the scissors, her hands trembling. The rattling stopped, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then the door flew open, snow swirling inside. The man stood there, his hood still up, the flashlight in one hand and the knife in the other. "Found you," he said, his voice cold and calm. Sarah screamed, lunging forward with the scissors. She aimed for his chest, but he sidestepped, grabbing her arm. The scissors fell to the shed floor with a dull thud. He yanked her out into the snow, her body hitting the ground hard. Pain shot through her belly and she cried out, clutching it. The man loomed over her, the knife glinting in the flashlight's beam. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. He grabbed her by the arm, pulling her to her feet. Sarah struggled, but her strength was fading. The cold, the pain, the fear, it was too much. Her vision blurred as he dragged her back toward her house, the snow swallowing her screams. Sarah's body screamed with pain as the man dragged her through the snow back toward her house. Her bare feet were numb, her pajama pants soaked and clinging to her legs. The cold bit into her skin, and her belly ached with sharp, relentless cramps. She didn't know if it was stress or something worse, but she clung to one thought. Emma had to survive. The man's grip on her arm was like iron, his flashlight beam cutting through the storm as he pulled her across the yard. The knife in his other hand glinted, a constant reminder of the danger. The Miller's porch light faded behind them, swallowed by the blizzard. Sarah's house loomed ahead, its dark windows staring like empty eyes. She twisted in his grasp, her free hand clawing at his wrist, but he didn't flinch. "Stop fighting," he said, his voice low and rough. "It's over, Sarah." "No," she gasped, her breath ragged. She couldn't let it end like this. Not for her, not for Emma. Her mind raced, searching for something, anything, to give her a chance. The scissors were gone, lost in the shed. Her phone was somewhere in the house, useless without a signal. But she wasn't helpless. Not yet. They reached the porch, and he shoved her through the front door. She stumbled, catching herself against the wall. The living room was still dark, the Christmas tree a silent witness to the nightmare. The man slammed the door shut, locking it with a click that echoed in Sarah's ears. He turned to her, the flashlight beam pinning her in place. For the first time, she saw his face clearly as he pushed back his hood. Her heart stopped. It was Daniel, the patient from Syracuse. His face was thinner now, his eyes sunken, but it was him, the man who'd sent her letters, who'd stood outside her apartment years ago, staring up at her window. She'd thought he was gone for good after the police got involved. But here he was, in her home, on Christmas Eve. "Daniel?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this?" He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You remember now? Good." He stepped closer, the knife steady in his hand. "You ruined my life, Sarah. You in that hospital. You reported me, got me locked up. My job, my family, gone. Because of you." Sarah's mind reeled. She remembered Daniel's case. He'd been admitted for a broken leg, but he'd fixated on her, calling her his guardian angel. The letters started after he was discharged, long, rambling notes about how she was meant to be with him. When he showed up at her apartment, she'd been terrified. The police had arrested him for stalking, and she'd moved to Willow Creek to escape. She hadn't known what happened to him after that. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, backing toward the couch. Her hands were free now, but her ankles were still loosely bound with tape. She needed to keep him talking. "I was scared, Daniel. You showed up at my home. I didn't know what else to do." "You didn't care," he snapped, his voice rising. "You didn't care what happened to me." "They put me in a psych ward for a year. Sarah. My wife left me. My kids won't speak to me. You took everything." "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. She meant it, but she knew it wouldn't change anything. His eyes were wild, filled with a pain that had twisted into something dark. She glanced around, looking for anything she could use. The fireplace poker was gone, but the scissors might still be in the house. Or maybe something else, a lamp, a book, anything heavy. Daniel stepped closer, the knife raised. "You're going to feel what I felt," he said. "You and that baby." Sarah's blood ran cold. She moved without thinking, diving behind the couch. Her belly slowed her, but she hit the floor and crawled toward the hallway. Daniel lunged, grabbing her leg. She kicked as hard as she could, her heel catching his chin. He grunted, loosening his grip, and she scrambled away, her hands fumbling with the tape on her ankles. It tore free, and she staggered to her feet. She ran for the kitchen, her heart pounding. The broken window let in a gust of cold air, snow dusting the floor. She grabbed a frying pan from the counter, its weight reassuring in her hands. Daniel was already in the doorway, his flashlight beam blinding her. She swung the pan, aiming for his head. It hit his shoulder and he stumbled, the knife clattering to the floor. Sarah didn't stop. She ran for the back door, her hands shaking as she unlocked it. She stumbled into the backyard, the storm swallowing her. The snow was deeper now, slowing her down. She heard Daniel behind her, cursing as he followed. Her eyes locked on the shed again, the miller's shed where she'd hidden before. It was her only chance. She reached the shed and slipped inside, closing the door quietly. Her breath came in short gasps, her belly cramping harder now. She crouched behind the boxes, clutching the frying pan. The shed was freezing, the air stinging her lungs. She heard Daniel's footsteps outside, crunching in the snow. The flashlight beam swept past the window, and she held her breath. Then, a new sound. Tires on the road. Headlights cut through the storm, faint but growing brighter. Sarah's heart leaped. Was it Tom? She didn't dare hope, but she peeked through the shed's window. A truck pulled into her driveway, its engine rumbling. It was Tom's truck. Relief flooded her, but it was short-lived. Daniel was still out there, somewhere in the snow. She heard him move, his footsteps heading toward the house. Sarah gripped the frying pan, her mind racing. She had to get to Tom to warn him. She crept to the shed door, opening it just enough to see. The truck's headlights illuminated the yard, and she saw Daniel's shadow near the porch, crouching like he was waiting. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped into the snow, moving as quietly as she could. Her bare feet were numb, her body aching, but she pushed forward. She reached the edge of the yard, the truck just 20 yards away. Tom was climbing out, his figure silhouetted against the headlights. "Tom!" she screamed, her voice hoarse. Daniel spun around, his flashlight beam finding her. Tom looked up, confused, then saw the man with the knife. "Sarah!" he shouted, running toward her. Daniel moved faster, charging at Sarah through the snow. She raised the frying pan, but her strength was gone. The cramp in her belly was unbearable now, and she stumbled, falling to her knees. Tom reached her just as Daniel did. He tackled Daniel, the two men crashing into the snow. The knife flew from Daniel's hand, disappearing into the white. Sarah crawled away, her hands clutching her belly. She felt a wet warmth between her legs and knew something was wrong. "Tom," she gasped. The baby. Tom pinned Daniel down, his fist slamming into the man's face. Daniel fought back, but Tom was bigger, stronger. He hit him again, and Daniel went limp, his flashlight rolling away. Tom scrambled to Sarah, his face pale. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hands shaking as he helped her up. "The baby," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I think I'm in labor." Tom scooped her up, carrying her to the truck. He laid her in the passenger seat and grabbed his phone, dialing 911. The signal was weak, but it connected. "We need an ambulance," he said, his voice urgent. "My wife's in labor and there's an intruder at our house." As the operator responded, Sarah's vision blurred. The pain was overwhelming now, coming in waves. She heard sirens in the distance, faint but growing louder. Tom held her hand, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "You're going to be okay," he said. "Both of you." The police arrived first, their flashlights sweeping the yard. They found Daniel, unconscious in the snow, and cuffed him. The ambulance came next, paramedics rushing to Sarah's side. She was fading, the pain and cold pulling her under. But she held on to Tom's hand, and she thought of Emma. Hours later, in the hospital, Sarah woke to the sound of a baby crying. Emma was born, small but healthy, despite the early delivery. Tom sat beside her, his eyes red from crying. "She's perfect," he said, his voice breaking. "You did it, Sarah." Sarah held her daughter, tears streaming down her face. The nightmare was over, but the memory of Daniel's eyes, his voice, would haunt her forever. She didn't know why he'd come for her, not fully, but she knew one thing. She and Emma were safe now. And that was enough.